Hello, and welcome to Creepycore and Folklore, the show about creatures, encounters, old tales, and myths. I'm your host, Iona Wayland, a dark fantasy author, mental health professional, and overall curious person. I want to join other spooky souls and hear about these unusual stories. Hello, spooky soul, and welcome back to part 2 of the Winter Folklore episode. If you haven't listened to the previous one yet, I have a part 1 that I did 2 episodes ago, and I'm following Magda Knight's article that I'll have in the show notes below. But they talk about winter folklore A to Z and cover different topics that start with each letter of the alphabet. And it's been a lot of fun to dig into, because some things I've heard of and some things I haven't. And I'd be really curious to know if you've heard of some of these things or have experience with them. I hope, before we jump in, I hope that you had a really good New Year. Sometimes the celebrations can be kind of intense, or there's like a pressure for it to be perfect. And so I hope that it was perfect for you, and whatever you love and how you wanted to bring in the new year. I know I'm very excited for 2023. I have some creative plans that I hope come to fruition and that I've been working on. But then also I really want to leave 2021 and 2022 away, because for the past 2 years, it's been really intense for me personally with health and my life developing and new life stages happening. And there's just been so much transition that I am ready to have kind of a chill 2023 year that's more focused on my family and my creative projects like this one. So thank you for joining me again today, and let's dive right in. Last time we left off on the letter L, and so today we're starting with the letter M. And this first one is actually one that I weirdly heard about many years ago, but I don't have personal experience with this tradition. But there's something called Marie Lloyd, and it's a skeleton mare. And in case you don't know, a mare is a female horse. So if you've read my book, Ashes, you'll definitely understand why I'm flipping out right now. But it's a Welsh Christmas pony zombie. And that's like how they describe it. So she apparently like rises from the dead in winter, and other people will rise from the dead and roam the streets and she'll lead this undead entourage behind her. And this part is really unsettling. So she tries to get into your home, and you have to like battle it out with rhymes so that she doesn't enter. So on New Year's Eve, which is perfect timing for this, there will be volunteers that parade a horse skull on a pole, and they drape it in white cloth and sheets, and they will like do a parade with Marie Lloyd. And it's really funny because like you're like fighting this thing off with rhymes, and I don't even know how you'd think straight if a skeletal horse that is undead tries to get into your home. Like coming up with rhymes or like a rap battle is not what I would have pictured on how to fend it off, but I find that very interesting. And in a future episode, I plan to go over all things horse related. Our equine friends deserve just as much attention as our feline friends. I've done 2 episodes about cats recently. Curiosity Cat is the first one, and then Kitty Positivity is the second one. But I think my next one needs to be about horses. But I do plan on covering her more in the future in a horse episode. But I just find that really unsettling and fascinating and amazing all at the same time. The next one is mistletoe. Of course, it is an evergreen. It's said to represent fertility, and people are encouraged to kiss if they find themselves and another human under the mistletoe. And if you, this is like so uncomfortable to me, if you don't kiss that, like the person that you find yourself standing with under the mistletoe, then you're, cursed to be single for another year. Oh, the horror of being single. Like what do you think? It's like, oh no, looks like I'm gonna have to not date anyone for a year. Damn. Like I don't understand. There's no, like, that's not really a consequence in my opinion. But I don't know. I was single for like a super long time, was very comfortable being like on my own terms. Although, of course, I'm married now and I have my sweet, sweet babo, my little sunshine. So maybe I'm saying that from a position of privilege of having found a partner, like someone I love very much. But I just could see this going so horribly where like someone is like messing with consent or boundaries of another person by using mistletoe, and then it's like, all right, if you don't kiss this creep, then I guess you're gonna have to be single. And I just keep thinking about the situation. It's like, I think I'd rather be single than be forced to kiss somebody. That's like really upsetting. So that portion of the mistletoe history, not a big fan of that, if you can't already tell. However, there's another way to use mistletoe. It's often cut and dried, and then you're supposed to burn it before the new sprigs of mistletoe grow. And if you burn it before the new sprigs grow, or basically before spring, you achieve luck in the new year. And if it burns with a steady flame, that's supposed to be a really good omen. So I like that portion of mistletoe background much better. The next one is called mummers. I always thought that mummers were carolers for some reason, but they're not. They are like kind of troops that travel the street and visit pubs and homes, and they put on a folk play. They're usually a comedy. There's usually a staged fight of some sort, and then there's most often a doctor character that revives the hero with a magic potion. And lots of times there are characters like St. George, the dragon killer, and man, I'm so superstitious about like demons and stuff. I don't know how I'm going to do a future demon episode, even though I'm really like, I did the angel episode and that one was fine. But when it comes to demons, I get like a little finicky. But okay, so there's St. George, the dragon slayer, and then I'm not going to say it correct. I'm going to say it wrong. Bizzlebub. And that way I don't feel like I'm cursing myself. Sorry, I'm like this. But there's characters that portray that. And most often in these mummers plays or these folk plays. Next up, we have the Northern Lights. I have a lot to say about this because it speaks to my heart personally. I have had a near-death experience in my life, and I honestly might make a bonus episode about it because it was really scary, but there was a lot of hope and connection from that experience that I found personally, and kind of like an event that happened that's not really explainable, that has really like given me light and hope in my life. But I had this near-death experience, and then when I was starting to recover, I was like, shit, I almost kicked the bucket. And on my bucket list, I really wanted to see the Northern Lights. And so I decided to get a round trip ticket to Iceland. And my husband and I went to that trip, went to go visit Iceland, and we got to go to Keflavik and Reykjavik. And it was a very short trip. It was just a couple days, but we got to see the Northern Lights from the plane. We didn't see it on the ground. It was too cloudy those several days that we were there, so we weren't able to do that. And I was also still very ill, so I couldn't travel or walk or hike like I want to. I definitely want to go back and visit if at all possible, to have like a more natural experience instead of just like kind of I had to sleep a lot. I really did. And I got to drink a lot of hot chocolate, so that was exciting. The chocolate there's amazing. But seeing it from the plane was just an incredible experience. I have goosebumps right now talking about it. It was so gorgeous. Like, I can't even describe it. It was otherworldly, absolutely stunning. And it's really cool to see how different cultures will process or have their own folklore about the Northern Lights. In Finland, the Northern Lights are called the Revontulet. It's actually called, I just double checked myself, the Revontulet, and it's associated with an Arctic fox. And the imagery behind this is that there was an Arctic fox that was running north and brushed mountains with it, and bits of its fur fell off or was kind of brushed away, and those caused sparks to fly into the air, and those sparks are the description of the Northern Lights. And I could absolutely see that being a beautiful Arctic fox folktale. And hey, I may or may not have an Arctic fox in my sequel that's going to come out hopefully this year. That's my secret, that I really want it to come out this year. That's my creative project I was alluding to earlier. So we shall see. I don't want to jinx it. There's in Gaelic folklore, they're called the merry dancers or the nimblemen. And I thought it was really interesting because at first I thought, oh, well, that might mean like celestial dancing type creatures or otherworldly beings. And it's funny because these are actually celestial warriors fighting. And so it's interesting to hear about like fighting and war kind of described as being nimble or dancing. Next one on our list, we have Old Man Winter. It is the personification of winter. He's often portrayed as being kind of bent over and covered in rags and furs to keep himself warm. He has a long beard and hair that have become that length because he's so old. And in Russia, he's called Morosko. Next up, we have the pine tree. Of course, another staple evergreen that's beautiful. It has a really aromatic fragrance that is easily recognizable. The pine scent is really nice. I have to be careful with the pine scent and with pine needles because I tend to have like reactions to them, even though they're so beautiful. It's neat because pines often have strong branches so that you can hang ornaments on them. And it's really neat because these pine trees and needles are supposed to represent eternal life and nature. And pine cones are supposed to symbolize continuity of life. That's why this article was talking about why you see so many pine trees planted in cemeteries, which I never realized that until now, that yeah, there are a lot of pine trees planted in cemeteries, and I never thought to look up why, but this makes a lot of sense, that symbolism of having like continuation of life, a longer lasting life, that kind of thing can be really comforting. In Christianity, the pine tree has two meanings. If you stand them upright with the trunk side down, and they are tall and they're said to point, like go into a point that is supposed to symbolize pointing to the heavens. However, in Poland, people will hang their pine trees upside down because it's said to represent the cross that Jesus was crucified on. And so having these two, like it points to the heavens or it can symbolize a cross, is like Christian symbolism that people enjoy. Next up, we have Queen of Winter. I had never heard of this before, and she sounds incredible. Wait till you hear her description. So this Queen of Winter's real name is Bera or Kaliach, and that means veiled one. She is considered a winter goddess. In Scottish myth, she is blue, has one eye, and is considered a hag. And this single eye is supposed to represent singularity of all things. So she has a very like magical yet philosophical way about her symbolic eye. In version 1 of the story, she's said to be seeking a hero lover. And if he accepts her in her hag form, she'll then transform into a beautiful young woman. And this transformation is said to symbolize the seeds in winter that eventually turn into the beautiful green sprouts in spring. Version 2 is that Beira is carrying a magical staff, and that she frees the ground from where she taps. So she'll tap the ground with this magical staff, and that will cause the sprigs of spring to grow. And she's said to have thrown her staff under sacred trees. And these sacred trees are often considered holly and goosebush. And that means that winter has come to an end. Next up, we have Robin Redbreast. And I think this is fun. I always think robins are so beautiful and so cool. They have such a unique look to them because they look very like a common bird, so to speak, or like a simple bird. But then they have this, like with their brown and dark brown feathers, and then underneath on their tummy they have these bright red plumage. So it's neat because the first story I ever wrote when I was like 8 or 9, like fully start to finish first story, it had a hardcover and everything. I actually got to read it out loud to my class, and the name of that book was Little Robin Redbreast and the Mixed Up Rumor. And I still remember feeling like, ooh, it had a plot twist, and ooh, it had a robin as a main character, and they illustrated it, and it was like kind of cute. And so at some point I need to find that ridiculous story. I think it's in an attic somewhere. I'll have to find it and reminisce about my first ever story. But robins don't migrate south for the winter, and so they often will stand out with that red plumage in the grays and whites of winter. You'll be able to see the robins pretty easily. In Irish folklore, it often represents the new sunshine. And it's said that Robin Redbreast had killed his father, which the father is considered the wren, which represents the old sunshine. And that he killed his father on the winter solstice, which is December 21st. And that he got the red breast from the bloody killing of his father. So that's like pretty morbid. In Christian folklore, there's the brown robin scorched its feathers from protecting baby Jesus from the blazing fire that got too close to the manger. And so he's said to be given that red plumage as like a reward for his close call. Although I feel like, are robins in Bethlehem or Jerusalem? Okay, I just checked. Yes, they are. Wow, that's really cool. Because first I was like, oh, I wonder if that was like Christian folktale, as in like, oh, I really like this bird, and so I'm going to kind of talk about it in that way. But, it probably originated from around that time and from that particular part of the world. Okay, this is future Iona here, rolling in from the bedroom, from the comfort of my bedroom. I recorded the other ones at work. So that's the beauty of podcasting, is you can kind of do it anywhere as long as your audio quality is okay or somewhat consistent. So my guess is, I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner, but my guess is recording in a bedroom is probably better because the bed and the linens will soak up the sound a little bit better. So let's experiment and see how this works. The next one we have is Saturnalia. It's a Roman pagan midwinter festival. I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but my favorite planet is Saturn, so I already like the sound of this. It's celebrated between December 17th to the 23rd. And there's supposed to be sacrifices that are made or offered to the temple of Saturn. And there's an exchanging of gifts, a big banquet, and parties afterward. Next up, we have Snegorochka. She is a snow maiden. She is the daughter or granddaughter, that kind of got a little confusing, of Ded Muros, the one that we talked about in Winter Folklore Part 1. And snake is a Russian word for snow. She accompanies Ded Muros to bring presents during the winter time to people. There's another version that's much more sad as to who Snegorochka actually is. This other version talks about an older couple who were not able to conceive a child, and so together they built one and carved a child out of snow and ice, and she became alive with their love. But she tried to play with the other children during the winter, and there was a bonfire, and at that point they were kind of chasing each other. They were jumping over, I guess it wasn't a bonfire, no one would be able to jump over that, but like this little fire area to stay warm, and they jumped over it. When she chased after them and wanted to copy them and she jumped over it, she melted. So that's another version of that story, which is really sad. Next up we have Tomt or Juletomte, which are these gnome-like creatures in Sweden. And they have this long white beard and a red cap. And this little friend kind of helps a family with their farm. They kind of choose a family that they want to help. They protect the animals and the children during this time of helping. And they take up residence in the farm or in a burial mound. And it's funny because the article said that they take residence in a quote nice and cozy end quote burial mound, and I'm like, when cozy to whom? I guess to the Tomt. So they are supposed to be treated well in return for their protection. If not, he has a really bad temper, and the bad temper includes being tricked or having poisonous bites. There have even been some that have been said to have been fatal or caused some to get very, very gravely ill. You're to treat them well and to thank them for their labor and assistance. You're supposed to leave porridge on Christmas Eve and burn the Yule log in winter. The next up we have unexpected guest. This is a tradition taken up in Poland, and what you do is you leave an extra space at the table that's set for an unexpected guest on Christmas Eve. This unexpected guest could be anything from a family, a friend, or a stranger, and it's supposed to signify goodwill toward others and being like willing to share what you've made with someone who you weren't planning on being there. Next up we have vanquishing. There's lots of discussion of endurance and fertility during the harshest season. And this could be fertility such as children or making children, I guess, but also, like with all, like with the mistletoe and the different representations of like holly and ivy and things like that. So there's fertility in that way, but also preparing for spring, but endurance as well when it comes to taking rations from the harvest and staying warm throughout the harshest months of the year. There's also lots of folklore around battles. So like I talked about before, the Northern Lights I thought would depict something else. Like I definitely resonate more with the Arctic Fox version of it, but when it comes to the Nimble Men depiction of the celestial warriors, then that's a battle type scene. There's also the Mummers plays talked about previously where they depict lots of wars or killing. And then of course Robin Redbreast has a very unique and particularly bloody backstory. So overall, winter folklore is filled with vanquishing enemies, threats, and beasts, as well as the hardships of winter. Next up, we have Wren Day. If you remember, Wren is supposed to signify the old sun that dies to make way for the new sun. Wren Day is celebrated in Ireland on December 26th on St. Stephen's Day. The old sun in the old year is represented here. And what used to happen was that a wren was hunted down in the old days But now, luckily, there's a fake one that's used and it's paraded around the town. It's very interesting because there are people in that parade called the Wren Boys, and then also sometimes mummers will dress in straw costumes in that parade to represent the old sun dying. Next up, we have the Wild Hunt. I couldn't believe I hadn't heard of this before. It's very interesting. There's very interesting lore behind this. So it's celebrated, it's Norwegian folklore, and it's said that the dead walk among the living. And it's also called Yule. So there are gods or fierce spirits that lead celestial warriors in a hunt across the sky. In Norse mythology in particular, Odin leads on an 8-legged horse named Stiprir. It can happen, technically the wild hunt can happen during any time of the year or at any point, but it's said to happen the most frequently between Yule and Twelfth Night. It's also said to happen before trials or war outbreaks. So during the wild hunt, you're supposed to honor your ancestors. You're supposed to leave food out for them so that they can partake in feasting. And you're also supposed to leave out harvested grain for the hunter's horses. And it's said that the ancestors and the horses kind of collect these earthly gifts and tokens of respect. And in return, they will give you good luck on your harvest for the next year. In German folklore in particular, the wild hunt will shout, "Mitten in dem Weg." I'm not sure the pronunciation of this because I wasn't able to find a pronunciation of the phrasing. And when I looked up individual words, it kind of was giving me the runaround. But it roughly means middle of the road. If they see you in their path and if you hear this cry, this is the part where I would not have survived this, but you're supposed to lie down in the middle of the road immediately, which I would have thought, like, get out of the road, but I guess they're commanding you to lay down in the middle of the road. And this is supposed to save you from most of the trampling somehow. So it's said that your feet will get cold because that's supposed to represent the hunting dogs and that run down your spine into your cold feet. And if you're very unlucky or you don't lay down fast enough, then you're said to be swept up in the wild hunt and never to return again. I say maybe lay down off the middle of the road, but I don't know. Who am I to say? Maybe it's not a roadway like a thoroughfare. Maybe it's the road as in you could be anywhere, but wherever the wild hunt goes, that's their directional road. I'm not sure. I would love to know more about the wild hunt folklore. It seems to have a very rich history. Next up, we have the winter solstice, specifically midwinter. It has the least daylight and it's the longest night of the year. So the sun is very strong in the sky, but every winter solstice, at least from what I've noticed, the sun is very bright but kind of slanted. It's very interesting. It's considered a turning point, kind of literally, for the earth, and a time of rebirth. Its symbolism varies in different parts of the world. For example, Scandinavian Christian solstice is considered the Festival of Lights or St. Lucia's Day. Maybe it's stemmed from earlier Norse solstice customs, but you're supposed to light fires to ward off spirits on the longest night. I think that's interesting because in the Halloweeny episode, I talked about how there were these huge bonfires that were lit to keep evil spirits away or darkness at bay, and that's also what brings in bats. I don't think bats are like really around during winter. I'm pretty sure they hibernate. Actually, let me check that real quick. Even though this has nothing to do with winter folklore in particular, I think it's neat to look at bats. I think they're very cute personally, even though they're super flappy. But it says, a quick Google search says, when cold weather drives insects away, bats must choose to hunker down and hibernate or migrate to warmer areas with more abundant food supply. Some bat species hibernate, some migrate, and some do both. And in temperate climates like Florida, bats may be able to stay year-round. and that's from the U.S. National Park Service, specifically about bats. So that's probably why there are no like bat sightings related to these big fires on St. Lucia's Day, but the symbolism behind the fire is quite similar. Next up, we have the wise men. The wise men weren't added or weren't in the original article that I'm basing this off of or reading through, but I wanted to add this in here because they are said to, at least in my family's background, particularly the Latinx side, they're said to, so kids are supposed to put shoes outside of their bedroom door on Christmas Eve, and then the three wise men leave coins and candy in the shoes of good children. And so I just wanted to point that one out because I didn't see it listed there. But also this article seems to cover more of the North and more European side of things. Next up, we have Xmas. So I'm not sure if you're aware or not, but the difference between Xmas and Christmas is that Xmas is considered secular, whereas Christmas is considered Christian because it's supposed to be the birth of Christ. And so it's neat because this particular one not only fulfills the letter X of of the alphabet that we're going through, but also it points out a lot of the symbolic customs that are specifically related to nature more so, and old pagan ideals and pagan roots. So Christmas carols comes from wassailing. Kissing under the mistletoe, which is still creepy to me, comes from fertility rituals. Santa Claus is kind of like Jualapuki and La Befana. Having greenery indoors is related to Saturnalia. Christmas elves look a lot like Tomte. And Christmas ornaments are specifically related to trees decorated with food and lights for Odin during the solstice. And there are, of course, many, many more, a lot of which I've already been talking about during these past 2 episodes. Next, we have the Yule log. It was first recorded in the 12th century, but it's gone on for much longer than that. You take a giant log / an entire tree, and you bring it into the house mid-winter. You put the largest end in first, and it's supposed to last all winter. It's considered unlucky to relight it once it's already been set ablaze. If at the end of winter you have some of the Yule log that remains, it's considered good luck or a good omen for the next year. And you're supposed to store the extra of the Yule log if you have any. And it's supposed to ward off misfortune, some of which would be like maybe lightning striking the house or the farm, mildew growing in the house, farm, or crops, and keeping away house fires, which I think is kind of interesting, where it's like, oh, you know, this thing that we've kept on fire for several months, this will keep our house from setting on fire. But it's supposed to be good luck, and we're not always sure where that, there's lots of interesting thoughts behind that. The Yule log is mostly found in Germanic and Nordic history, but it also shows up in Europe with variations. In Provence, the grandfather of the family or the oldest male of the family is supposed to carry the Yule log around the house 3 times with wire before burning. In Burgundy, gifts are stored beneath the log. In Yorkshire, candles for dinner are lit from the Yule log by the youngest person in the household. The next one are the Yule lads, and my side note to this is that I'm kind of bitter because I had done the research for this, and I went to a holiday party for my work, and they had like winter trivia, like winter customs trivia, and one of the questions was about the Yule Lads, which I'm going to go over in a second. And I could not remember where it was from. And now I will never forget because I got it wrong. My whole table got it wrong. And I was like, damn it, I researched this. I just wrote it down the other day. But the Yule Lads are known in Iceland, and they are 13 trolls. And for kids who have misbehaved, they cause trouble on Christmas and they scare children. However, later on in their lore, as they became more developed, they might leave gifts in shoes of well-behaved kids, and that reminds me of the wise men. And they later on got names, so all 13 of them had names specific to what they did. So one's called the Spoon Licker, the other one's called the Sausage Swiper, the other one's called a Gully Hawk, which means it lurks in the gullies or ditches, etc. Like it continues on from there. The very last one listed in the article is Zenith, and the author Magda Knight reports that this is the end, and that there kind of like wasn't anything to put for the letter Z. But I wanted to include the North and South Poles since they're included with the Santa lore and are the zenith of our Earth that's always snowy and icy and cold. I also want to say that it's the end of our old year and we're now on to the next one. So I hope that everyone is safe, happy, and healthy, and I'll talk to you again next week. Thanks to all you spooky souls out there for listening to Creepycore and Folklore. Follow on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok if you're looking for more uncanny content. If you have your own tales to tell, you can email creepycoreandfolklore@gmail.com. If you liked this, please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts, or tell a friend who might enjoy these stories to spread the word. If you're interested in dark fantasy, check out my Hollowverse series. Ashes is available now in paperback and ebook on Amazon and audiobook on Audible, and the sequel is underway. I'm Iona Wayland, and I'll see you next time.